What's up, Bug Doug with D&E in the Garage. Today we are doing part 2 of History of the Cherokee. If you have not seen part 1, it's linked up in the corner. It's linked down there in the description. Go watch it. You're not gonna know the characters, the plot line, whole storyline. So when we left the Cherokee, it was 2001. It had just been killed by an evil German named Wolfgang. And in the United States, this is seemingly the end of the story. This is where the Cherokee line gets a little bit murky. In 2002, they released the Jeep Liberty in the United States. It replaced the Jeep Cherokee. Everywhere else in the world, and I've mentioned this before, the Jeep Liberty is actually the Jeep Cherokee. I've heard lots of reasons why they changed it for the United States. Some people say that because of September 11th, they thought things would sell better. Some people say they were finally trying to actually separate and not have the Cherokee and Grand Cherokee existing at the same time. I don't know what it was. It doesn't really make any sense because they brought it back later, but for intents and purposes, the KJ Liberty is the KJ Cherokee, and that's how we're gonna call it on this channel and in this video. All right, it is in fact the 3rd generation Cherokee. It is released in 2001. It's based on the 1997 concept vehicle, the Dakar, and if you look at it, that concept's actually pretty darn cool. It was the first vehicle to be powered by the then new PowerTech 2.4 and 3.7 liter engines. We've talked about the 3.7. I'm not a fan, but the 2.4 is actually a pretty good engine. It went into a lot of different Mopar vehicles. It was also available with a 2.5 and 2.8 liter CRD, which was available in the United States, but nobody friggin' bought them, which is why there are none today. People always talk about, oh, there's no diesels in the United States. They keep trying to sell them here, but nobody buys them. People need to buy them for diesels to be available. I don't know how that logic is lost on people. It was also the first Jeep to get independent front suspension. Now, in 1963, there was an IFS version of the Wagoneer. It was a very early version of IFS and was only available on the 4-wheel drive, and it was very short-lived because people didn't like it. So for all intents and purposes, we're calling the 3rd gen KJ Cherokee the first vehicle with IFS. This is another reason it gets a ton of hate. During its life, it was offered with 3 trims with a number of special additions. You had the Sport trim, which was your base model. It came standard with a 2.4 liter 4-cylinder, 5-speed manual, 16-inch steely wheels, manual windows, and gray fenders and cladding. Of course, you could upgrade this, as many people did, to the automatic transmission. After that, you had the Renegade trim level, which was replaced in 2007 by the Latitude trim level. This was, I guess, meant to be like the off-roady, sporty, upscale, but not luxury version. This one came standard with the 3.7 liter V6. You had color matching cladding and fender flares. You got fog lights with optional roof fog lights, which at various points in my life have thought were either really cool or really hideous. Additionally, you got 17-inch alloy wheels. After this, you got the limited package, which is your luxury package. It has everything from the Renegade, with the addition of an overhead EVIC, power seats, leather seats, all the stuff you'd expect a luxury model to have. In 2005, they gave it a partial facelift. It's weird. They gave it a taller grille with a flatter hood, but only for the Renegade models. People have speculated this was to make it look more like the Renegade. It also got fog lights in the grille instead of in the bumper, which in my opinion is a much better look, and again, it kind of draws things back to the Wrangler. If you look at the grille from Liberties or Cherokees at that time period, you can absolutely see a correlation to what would later come the JK. So it makes perfect sense. Much like its predecessor, you could either get Command Track or Select Track with either a 231 or a 242 transfer case respectively, and that is your KJ Cherokee. It was in production from 2002 to 2007. It gets a lot of mixed reviews. I hated them when they first came out. I hated them until a number of years ago, but I've seen a lot of them go to 250, 300,000 miles, even with that 3.7, which y'all know I don't like. They've grown on me. I'd really like to get my hands on one of the 4-cylinder 5-speeds for a daily. It has the 241 and the 231, which are incredibly strong, capable transfer cases, and you could get it with an 8 1/4 in the rear. So even though it has IFS and it's tiny and arguably ugly as sin, it just has like that iconic early 2000s out of touch with everything bubbly look that everything had. But I don't think they deserve the hate they get, and they also deserve to be recognized as part of the Cherokee line, because they absolutely are. The KJ was ultimately replaced in 2008 by the KK Liberty, and what happened with the KK Liberty is Jeep now had the Patriot and Compass brands in the mix, so they didn't need another 4-cylinder SUV, so they dropped the 4-cylinder. The 3-cylinder was the only gas option with a 2.8 liter option, but it did not meet new US emission standards, so it was only available in Europe. This was the first Jeep to ever share a platform with a Dodge vehicle. It shared a platform with the Dodge Nitro. They look practically identical. The only difference is they got different engines, and the Dodge Nitro was arguably somehow way uglier, even though it looked so much similar. Came in 2 basic trim levels with a number of special additions. You can get the Sport, which was obviously the base model. It was originally standard with a 6-speed manual, but they dropped that and later made it standard with an automatic. Came standard with AC, 16-inch alloy wheels, cloth seats, power, doors, and windows. Then you had the Limited edition, which came standard with an automatic transmission. Chrysler's Uconnect, which is kind of like a OnStar-ish. It's a voice command thing. Satellite radio, dual zone climate, standard. It also came with the Sky Slider roof, which is something we're going to have to talk about now. What it is a moonroof that goes from the front of the vehicle all the way to the back. It's 60 inches long by 30 inches wide. It's kind of like a soft top for an SUV. It opened front to rear or rear to front. The idea was to give you a convertible open air look a la a Wrangler. The problem, they were awful. They leaked. The motors broke. They didn't work. They made it loud on the highway. It was an awful, awful, awful decision. And there were recalls on them. Everybody who has one hated one. Cool idea. Thanks for trying, Chrysler, but you absolutely failed. And it's one of the reasons why the KK Liberty or Cherokee is kind of an awful vehicle. They're not good. It's, in my opinion, it's my least favorite of the 5 generations of the Cherokee. Now, after the KK comes the KL. That's the Cherokee we know today. This is the one that I think is probably most hated, because this is the one that brought the Cherokee name back to the United States. Now, when the Cherokee name left the United States in 2002, we had no reason to believe it was ever coming back. The Cherokee was dead. You had the SJ and the XJ, and that was it. Then they bring the KL back and give it the Cherokee name back, when in reality all of these have been the Cherokee all along. And it was not received well because of how it looked, because of its size, because of its affiliation, obvious affiliation with Fiat. People did not like it. Another problem is that it shared a, I can't even say it with a straight face, it shared a platform with the Dodge Dart, which did not help anything at all. An interesting thing to note, though, its 106 inch wheelbase was 1.1 inches longer than the ZJ, 5.1 inches longer than the XJ, and only 2.7 inches shorter than the original SJ. Now, clearly, I'm not suggesting that the KL has anything to do with the SJ. It's just interesting to note that while it was getting smaller, it is in fact getting larger. Now, it was also, or is also, offered with some relatively capable 4-wheel drive systems. It's got Jeep's Active Drive 1, which is actually a very basic full-time all-wheel drive system. It defaults to the front wheels to reduce parasitic drivetrain load, and then when the wheels slip, it gets your power transferred to the back wheels. That's what they put standard in the Renegade. They put that standard in the Compass. Very baseline, basic. Then you have Active Drive 2, which has everything from Active Drive 1, except it adds a 2.92 to 1 low gear, which also locks the axles together. It's kind of like all-wheel drive Select Track at that point. After that, this is what goes into the Trailhawks. You have the Active Drive Lock, which has everything from AD2, but it adds Rock Mode, which is basically just locking rear differential. So it's kind of like the difference between Quadra-Track and Quadra-Drive at that point. The trim levels, it came in 4 basic trim levels. You got your Sport, which is obviously your standard. Comes with 17-inch steel wheels, 5-inch Uconnect cloth seats, 2.4 liter multi-air or Tiger Shark with the 9-speed auto with a 3.2 liter V6 optional. After that, you have the Latitude, which replaced the Sport completely in 2019, which adds alloy wheels and an 8.4 inch Uconnect. Next, you have the Trailhawk. This is what everybody's writing home about, which comes with unique color options, 8.24A Uconnect. The A in the Uconnect adds 911 response. I guess when you're out there in the middle of Moab and you get high centered on something, now you can call 911 and someone will come and tow you off. You also get a 1-inch lift tuned off off-road suspension, improved approach, departure, and breakover angles. And then the most expensive option is going to be your Limited, which has basically everything except the lift from the suspension from the Trailhawk, but you get heated seats and exclusive wheel and color patterns. The engines that were available in this vehicle, it had some engines and they made some unit of power. At this point in my research, I basically was falling asleep at my desk, and here's where we're going to do the critical thinking or response portion to this video and the Cherokee line as a whole. All right, let's digest everything we've learned and explain why I'm just sort of trailing off here on the KL. I do not hate the KL. I do not hate any of the Cherokees. I don't really like the KK, but I don't hate any of them. But here's the problem. When we started talking about the Cherokee in this first video with the SJ and the XJ, we're talking about off-road packages. We're talking about 6.6 liter V8s. We're talking about American Icon trucks, tow packages. The things that made things different between the different trim levels were Dana 44s. Now fast forward to the KL, and the things that are making things different between the different trim levels are like exclusive color options. When I went to look into what exactly the Trailhawk had, the first thing that it listed that was different than the other versions of the KL were exclusive color options. Not the lift, not the fact that it had tuned off-road suspension. The off-road version, the Trailhawk, the first thing that they bother mentioning in their marketing wank is the exclusive color options. And I think that that's the problem with where the Cherokee is today and why people are having such a hard time associating it and relating it to what we know as the Cherokee. Now, first of all, as I've mentioned before, if people had just called it the Cherokee all along, I don't think it would have been as hard for us to accept what we have today. But additionally, they're trying to capitalize on that identity that the XJ and SJ built without actually having to do anything or put anything towards that. All right, they want their cake and they want to eat it too. They want to be able to build a vehicle that's going to conform to all these standards, and people in the city are going to want to buy it, and yuppie friggin' millennials are going to want to buy it, but they also want to try to trick you into believing you're getting an XJ. And you can't do both. Again, this is not hate towards Jeep per se. This is definitely not hate towards the Cherokee. It's just me. I'm doing my research here and I'm trying desperately to keep it together. Because I don't hate this vehicle, but I was boring myself with my own friggin' research. And I understand that that's just where vehicles are going. And I think that's what we all need to realize, that we're never going to be able to get an XJ again. And for marketing departments to try to trick us into thinking that any of these new vehicles are in any way like any of the old vehicles, with the exception of the Dodge Challenger, they are doing exactly that. They are doing exactly what they did in the 60s and 70s. Here's a giant displacement, completely impractical engine. We've strapped it to the lightest possible frame, chassis, whatever. Go, try not to kill yourself. Kudos on that, Dodge. Because even like Ford, they're like, oh yeah, we're going to capitalize on our muscle car past with a turbo V6. Cool. I digress. Please don't hate me. What I'm trying to break down here is that the legacy of the Cherokee seems to be tainted with what we have today. And I think the only way we can go forward as true, honest Jeep fans, which I am, and I know you are too, is to appreciate what we had in the past, to try to preserve as much of what we can of what we had in the past, and go forward not using the lens of 1974, 1984, not even 2001. We just have to accept the Cherokee for what it is today. We need to understand that there's no way you could build an SJ or an XJ today. You know, I mean, that maybe an XJ, it was unibody, right? But they'd have to put the safety standards, that's what kills it, you know what I mean? So as we look at all 5 generations as a whole, and we look at the SJ Cherokee, the truck, to the XJ Cherokee, the answer to the gas price, which later defined what an SUV could and should be, onto the KJ Cherokee, which seems a little lackluster, but is kind of that missing link between the old Cherokees and the new ones. You see, you've still got the solid rear axle with the 242 manual transfer case, but you got IFS and it's really tiny, and the safety features into the KK, which honestly, the KK probably could have been a better vehicle, but it was released in 2008. right along with the recession, right along with the gigantic dip in domestic auto sales here in the United States. So it was doomed. Any vehicle that was released between like 06 and 2010 was pretty much doomed to not do well because nobody was buying freaking cars. Now the KL is selling like crazy today. People love the new Cherokee. People who usually wouldn't buy Jeeps, and I've said this before and I'm going to reluctantly say it again now. I want to see the Jeep brand survive. I don't want to see the Jeep brand go under, ever. And for that to happen, people need to buy new Jeeps. Since idiots like you and I are going to keep buying our 20-year-old WJs, XJs, ZJs, TJs, whatever Js, somebody's got to buy the new KL, so they need to build the KL for the people that are going to buy it. It's not us. They built it for the people that are going to buy it. So as true Jeepers, it is our responsibility to accept the KL. I'm going to get a rash of hate in the comments of people who refuse to do so. I understand, you do you, but it's not like there was anything they could have done to it that was going to make people like us buy one. Like, I just don't want a new Jeep. I want my old one, so couldn't afford it anyway, you know? So they did what they had to do. Let's take a second to reflect on all 5 models. Go ahead and tell me which is your favorite. If you insist, tell me which is your least favorite. I know you're going to anyway. I'd love to know what you think about these videos. So by all means, let me know down there in the squawk boxes what you guys think about it. I'd love to hear about your experience with any of the 5 generations of the Cherokee. I love hearing your stories about y'all Jeeps. You guys have some crazy Jeep resumes, man. We'll get people like, oh yeah, I started with the 1950 whatever Commando, and then I had a SJ Cherokee and 20 Jeeps deep. I'm like, dang, that guy's got my whole bucket list in his past. So let me know, guys. Keep it coming. As always, thanks for watching. See you next time.